Hello my friends, welcome to Lindy's Magpie Reads. I'm here to tell you about books. I have got 9 to tell you about, so I'm only going to talk briefly about each one of them. Several of these I picked up in conjunction with booktube readathons that are going on, and if I mention a readathon, you'll know you can find out more about it in the comments section down below. And also, be aware that you can skip from book to book. If I'm going to be talking about one that you're not so interested in, you can navigate ahead using the timestamps down below. So, before I get into the books themselves, I'll just mention that I have been back to natural dyeing. I've spent 2 days working on a project, but it's not finished yet, so I'll tell you more about that later. But I did dye a handkerchief with black bean dye, so this is what it looked like before when it was ready to dye. I had used tea leaves to prepare the handkerchief for dyeing and then dyed it in the black beans, and I'm going to see how color fast this is. I know that black bean dye is quite fugitive, so I'm just going to see how long it lasts, and then I can dye it some other color. And the other thing I've been doing lately is rowing, sculling on the gorge, which is quite close to where I live here in Victoria. Okay, on to the books. April is Poetry Month, so I went through some really old poetry books that I have, and I read Judy Grahn's A Woman is Talking to Death. This is the original edition published by Women's Press in 1970, I think it was. Sorry, 1974. And there are even illustrations in it. Judy Grahn is a lesbian poet and thinker, author. You can find this poem online, and I am going to link it down below. The full thing is there. It opens with a scene on the Bay Bridge in Oakland and a death that happens there. It's quite long. 10 pages, and the print is quite interesting. It's like typewriter printing, very little margins. And this was discarded from the Pride Center Library in Edmonton, but it had previously belonged to the precursor to the Pride Center, which was the Gay and Lesbian Community Center of Edmonton. And prior to that, it was in the library of the Gay Alliance Towards Equality. That was one of the early Pride organizations in Edmonton. So there are all these stamps in it for these from the library. And speaking of bridges, next up is a memoir in verse, 10 Bridges I've Burnt, by the gay poet Brontez Purnell. And I listened to it in audiobook. It's actually his memoir in verse. He reads his own work on the audiobook. Most of the content uses the kind of strong language that might not be suitable for family viewing on YouTube. But one of the lines that really caught my interest is when he says, "The most high-risk homosexual behavior I engage in is simply existing." I had expected more autobiographical information in this memoir in verse. He does talk about incidents from his past. For example, 20 years ago, he was involved in quite a serious altercation, fist fight with another poet in San Francisco. He does mention his wife. He's married, but I had to Google to find out more information about that and about her. But taken all together, I feel like I've got a good impression of the kind of person Purnell is, full of gusto and an exhilaration for life. He has his periods of despair, as any intelligent thinking person could have. And if you are ready for strong language and frankness about sexual acts, then I can recommend
10 Bridges I've Burnt.
I am decided. I said to my gay uncle when I was 20, the boys don't like me. Not even looking up from the fried chicken he was breading for dinner, he said to me, honey, go look outside that window there and on the sidewalk. You'll see that in San Francisco, even the trash gets picked up once a week.
I would count that one for People April as well as Poetry Month. And another readathon that's going on right now is Trans Girl April, reading works by trans creators. So this next one fits into that category. I Keep My Exoskeletons to Myself is by Marisa Crane, who is non-binary. This title is currently shortlisted for a Lambda Literary Award in the speculative fiction category. It's a queer dystopian novel where prisons have been abolished in the US. However, instead, any crime that someone commits, you get a shadow attached to you. And shame is used as a deterrent. And the shadows aren't fairly distributed. So in the opening, we have a lesbian couple where one of the women has died, and we've got a newborn who already is born with a shadow, and Chris is left grieving and with a baby to look after. I'm going to read you just a little bit so you get a feel for the sparkle and humor in her prose. And the other thing that is used as a crime deterrent is having multiple cameras in people's homes. Now, this is not so far-fetched. This is something that's happening in China to the Uyghur people there. Yeah, so our narrator, Chris, has got a shadow, and we don't find out till quite a bit later in the novel how she got it. But she is addressing herself to the urn full of ashes of her late lover. I watch a lot of reality TV in the days following your death, the kid alternating between guzzling down her bottle of hospital formula and sleeping in her rocking sleeper thing. I'll admit, I don't know its proper name. I wonder if this is what it feels like to work in the department's surveillance unit, although our lives are not filtered and dispensed by editors with a dramatic agenda, the contextual horror of it all. I lick the salt off pretzels, then feed the naked pretzels to Mischief, while the people on TV bitch and moan and drink and hurt each other's feelings. They lie, they cheat, they lose their jobs. It feels nice to feel sorry for people who are far better off than me. It seems Mischief, for the first time, has discovered our new litter of one. She tiptoes up to the kid's swinging contraption and wets the kid's hand with her nose. She shakes her head a few times, wipes her face clean. I focus on my own recent discoveries. Broken egg yolks now make me cry. The kids crying makes me cry. The mail makes me cry. Who gave businesses permission to print your name? It feels like time has slowed so dramatically that it has begun to move in reverse. My face, although pink and puffy, looks younger than it has in years, as if relieved that all that worrying has been justified all along. Truth is, I'm terrified the department will confiscate our baby if they suspect even the slightest hint of neglect, but that doesn't stop me from disassociating for hours on the floor while the kid learns about her new home, the bassinet. Through the novel, the child gets older, and Chris and the child get new neighbors, Julian and Dune. So I'm going to read just a little bit from that because this applies also to trans girl April. Later on, I learn that Julian is trans and Dune is non-binary, but Dune isn't out. Use they, them when we're alone, she, her in public, they say. What's non-binary? Asked the kid, examining our faces. Julian and Dune laugh, and Julian pretends to take a bite out of Dune's arm. A very delicious person, says Julian, smirking at Dune. Okay, says the kid, a little annoyed. But really? It means I'm not a man or a woman, says Dune. I'm just me. The kid seems satisfied by this answer. She slides off Julian's lap and begins to chase the dog around the courtyard again. So that was I Keep My Exoskeletons to Myself. I thought it was fabulous. Next up, more trans creators. I'm going to tell you about a specific graphic novel of the Lumberjanes, the edition called The Infernal Compass, written by Lilah Sturges, who is trans, and illustrated by Polterink, who is a queer Austrian cartoonist. But before I get to that, in case you aren't familiar with the Lumberjanes, the original series started in 2015, and it was created by 4 people, 2 of whom have since come out as either trans or non-binary. A non-binary creator is N.D. Stevenson, who now goes by Nate, and he, him pronouns, and Gus Allen, who has come out as trans masculine, also uses he, him pronouns. And the other 2 creators are Grace Ellis and Shannon Waters. And then after the original comics, several issues have other creators involved in it. And I think that original series ended in about 2020, but this one that I'm telling you about, I think it was 2018 that it came out, and there are 2 more by Sturges and Polterink. The art is in a nice soft gray with spot color of bright green. We've got the same group of campers at a summer camp for hardcore lady types. These 5 girls, I think they're in their early teens, and we've got Jo, who is a trans girl, and her best friend Alice. We've got Mal and Molly, and those 2 are romantically interested in each other. It's mutual. And then there is Riley as well. In this adventure, the supernatural element is slightly different. This time we've got robots, but there is kind of an alternate dimension and a terrific narrative arc in quite a long story. It's about 90 pages long, about self-acceptance and being true to yourself, a very satisfying read. But I suggest start with the beginning of the Lumberjanes. If your library gives you access to the Hoopla database, you can find the Lumberjanes there in collected volumes. So much fun, suitable for upper elementary school all the way to adults. I almost forgot to mention that this cover really reminds me of another non-binary comics cover, and that is Genderqueer by Maya Kobabe. I'm sure that's not accidental. So the Lumberjanes are always, as I said, dealing with these strange supernatural characters, and that leads me to the next book that I want to tell you about, Fox Maidens by Robin Ha. And it is a queer retelling of a Korean myth about the Gumiho, which is a nine-tailed fox who can transform into a beautiful woman. I'll show you what the digital art is like. It's too shiny for me to hold it up. You won't see very much. It's set in 16th century Korea. The central character is Kai Sung. Her father is a general, and he is teaching her martial arts along with her brother, and she is really good at it. It's full of action. It's very feminist. It's got queer romance in it, and I highly recommend it. Robin Ha also wrote a memoir in graphic novel format. So because it's People April, I want to talk about that. I read it 3 years ago, but I still remember how much I enjoyed it. The author was 14 when her mother traveled with her from Korea to the United States, and Robin thought that this was just a holiday. She didn't realize that it was a permanent move, and she had some struggles fitting in, learning English, and dealing with racism in the US. And in this memoir, she shows how she grew to appreciate the perseverance of her mother. There were reasons why they moved. We see some interesting comparisons with contemporary South Korean culture. For example, how in Korea there's this tradition of bribery, and you can see in this panel the teacher telling Robin's mother, all the other parents are smart enough to bring a token of gratitude for their kid's teacher. You didn't bring anything? And then when Robin went back to Korea as a young adult in 2002, she learned that it was mandatory to put a photo of yourself on job applications in Korea, and even high school students were getting plastic surgery. The memoir is very poignant, talks about the challenges, talks about the rewards, and as I said, her amazing mother. So I also recommend Almost American Girl by Robin Ha. Next, I've got a couple of audiobooks to tell you about, starting with a work of nonfiction called We Sow, on the personal, ecological, and cultural significance of seeds, and it's by Jennifer Jewell. The audiobook is read by the author. She's talking about seeds. She does it by going through a year in her life in Northern California, talking about her work as a gardener and about finding out more about seeds and where they come from, the seeds that we plant in our garden, as well as those used for larger agricultural purposes. In a way, it reminded me a bit of The Comfort of Crows by Margaret Rinkle. But if you're only going to read one of that type of book, I would recommend The Comfort of Crows instead of this one. If you are very keen on plants and growing things and the science of plants, then yes, pick up What We Sow. I wouldn't give it high priority except for those particular readers. She combines memoir with ecology and culture, and it was sufficiently interesting for me. I did take a bunch of notes. Some of the main concerns are that we are losing genetic diversity in seeds, and it's genetic diversity that enables us to adapt to change in the future. She has some nice poetic turns of phrase, like seed pods are the original single-use storage container. She talks about a lot of other people who are working as keepers of seed and keepers of culture, like Diane Wilson, who wrote the novel The Seed Keeper, and also Camille Dungy. And I have been wanting to read Camille Dungy's memoir, Story of a Soil, Story of a Black Mother's Garden, since I got this book a year ago. I hope to get to it for Springathon next month. Let me know if you're interested in a buddy read of soil. Maybe that's how I'll get to it. In What We Sow, there is a lot of important information, so I don't know. I feel like I've maybe been a bit too hard on What We Sow because, as I said, I did make a lot of notes. I did get a lot out of it. It didn't quite all work for me. Oh yeah, that's probably the best way to put it. Next up is the audiobook Look at the Lights, My Love by Annie Ernaux, translated from French by Alison Strayer, and it was read by Tavia Gilbert. Quite a short piece of memoir. Ernaux is writing about the culture of superstores. So she's talking about Auchan in the town where she lives in France, and the people that she meets there, the consumerism of it, like watching people interact in the stores with their children who want toys. After Christmas, these toys all in a bin on big discounts, and nobody wants them then. She talks about how in the pet section, that's where she's found the people most willing to talk to strangers. This book was published in 2014, and during the time that she was writing it, she also talks about news stories like a couple of tragedies in Bangladesh where in one case it was a fire where I think over 300 people died, and in another where the Rana Plaza collapsed and over 1,000 people died and more than 2,000 people were injured in that tragedy. And these were all garment factory workers, and amongst the ruins were found the Auchan label, as well as many other well-known company labels from the West. So there are global concerns in this writing that she does. Once in a while somebody recognizes her, and this is one of the interactions. Are you Annie Ernaux? She's read a few of my books and wrote to me 15 years ago. She's just published an autobiographical novel. And that reminds me of this whole issue of autofiction. Autobiographical novels are now sometimes called autofiction, and Roz of Scallydandling about the books made a video recently, Is Autofiction a Crime? It's a fabulous video where she has the pros and cons to crime, not a crime. And Annie Ernaux is one of the authors mentioned. So I am going to link Roz's video down below in case you haven't seen it. And last up, this is the best of the bunch. I have this picture book for Picture This, April readathon to encourage adults to read picture books. And this works for Poetry Month as well. It's full of poems by Robert Macfarlane and art by Jackie Morris, two English creators. This is their response to the changes made to the Oxford Junior Dictionary, which is the most widely used in schools around the world. And what's happened is around 40 common words concerning nature were dropped out of a recent edition in order to make room for words like attachment, blog, broadband, bullet point, cut and paste, and voicemail. So what these two did was take 20 of the nature words that were dropped out and incorporated them into this absolutely gorgeous poetry and picture book. In the introduction it says, "You hold in your hands a spell book for conjuring back these lost words. To read it, you will need to seek, find, and speak. It deals in things that are missing and things that are hidden, in absences and appearances." And it is absolutely gorgeous. Highly, highly recommend for everyone. And that's all I've got for you today. Thank you so very much for watching. Please let me know if you've read any of these or you plan to read any of these books. Have you been participating in Trans Girl April and Picture This and People April and Poetry Month? Let me know in the comments down below, or just say hello to let me know that you stopped by. I love hearing from you. And I will see you all soon in the next one. I'm going to leave you with a few scenes from a gorgeous park here in Victoria, Beacon Hill Park. Bye for now.